an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering the Cradle series, Book 9, Bloodline, chapters 14, 15, and 16. In these chapters, Lindon doesn't get to save as many people as he hoped, because the fucking Phoenix shows up and ruins everything, and Rhaegon Shen has a lot to answer for, and I hope somebody drowns him in a fucking bathtub. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Andy for commissioning this episode and also for the instructions on the reset of the Crowdcast, because the chat is working! Yay! So, guys, here's the thing. I was talking to Owen, my fiance, who read this before me, and he was expressing some frustration with the book. And when I got to this part, he was like, so do you see how this was a little bit hard for me? Because I wound up hating everybody in Sacred Valley so much that I was not invested in their escape, because I didn't care if they lived or died, because they are all terrible people. And the thing is, yes, I do get that. I really do. I think, more successful than Owen was at doing the thing that Yaren's old master did in the prologue of Wintersteel, where he has to keep telling himself these people are not worthy of his contempt, but more his pity, because they just fucking don't know any better. And it's not easy to get yourself to really believe that. It's a lot easier when they're not in front of you, I think. So I was still pretty invested for the sake of the people, because I was like, I'm sure there's decent folks mixed in with the absolute scumbags that we have had to interact with so far. But mostly, I am just so invested in Lindon getting what he wants that was enough for me. You know, it wasn't even any longer about the people of Sacred Valley. It was just, I wanted so much for Lindon to feel like he had accomplished something, because literally the whole series up to this point has been building to this goal. And I was going to be so devastated if after everything he doesn't manage to save anyone. And he does save people. It's not as many as he had hoped. But, you know, he saved a few thousand, I would think, if you put together the people on his cloud ship and the Akura cloud ships that had not yet, taken off, because they were under orders to leave as soon as the Titan began to get into the valley. But not all of them did it as quickly as others. I mean, even if he was able to save 1,000 people, that is something. But I do understand if for some folks out there, this didn't feel as high stakes because you just hated everyone so much that you kind of wanted to let them die. And I can't even blame you for it. You know, these people, I think it would help if we saw more innocents that were genuinely good-hearted and trying their best, but all we see are people who don't want to listen, who are extremely disdainful of Lindon, distrustful, and actively murderous, you know? So it is a little hard in that regard, and I just think that, personally, I think Will White did a good enough job making me really care about Lindon that it still mattered to me, you know, but I can see how maybe that wouldn't be enough for everybody. Jan says, I'm still mad at Elder Whisper. He should have supported Lindon's cause. He knows the Dread Gods are real. You know, Jan, what happened with Elder Whisper? You bring up a good point. I'm not even remembering if we didn't see him, did we? Because I feel like, did Lindon want to go and see him? And then he got kind of sidelined, if I remember correctly, because it's not like Lindon didn't think about him. He definitely wondered what Elder Whisper would think, I believe. But yeah, this whole section is just full of like shit going wrong, people not listening or just being caught completely off guard. Even if they were listening, it wouldn't necessarily have mattered. It's rough. And like I said, considering that this evacuation is what the whole series has supposedly been leading up to, it really doesn't go well. Not really. They do their best. 2 monarchs show up in support of their cause, which is more than I think they could have hoped for. And still, it goes so poorly. And I, like I said, really hope that somebody just grabs Rhaegon Shen by the fucking mane and drags his ass into the bottom of the ocean and drowns him. I don't know why I'm like convinced drowning would do the trick. I think it's just because the cats hate water thing is on my mind, and I'm like, yeah, do it with water. Fuck that guy. But yeah, that's my feeling. I don't know what Rhaegon Shen's endgame is. Like I've said before, he's following after the Bleeding Phoenix. I am assuming what he's trying to do is get into the labyrinth. Or maybe he's trying to get at Subject 1. But I don't know what he hopes to do with Subject 1. Because as far as I am aware, if all the other Dread Gods are descendants of Subject 1, then that Dread God has to be even more powerful than the others. This is my assumption. I don't have any real evidence to this. I'm just going with, my gut. And if that's so, I don't see why Rhaegon Shen has any inkling that he could do something with a Dread God of that level when he could barely handle the Phoenix, So, is it... What's he after? And I keep thinking back to his interview with I was about to say Lindon, Aethan, where he's buying Aethan out in the tournament. And he says something about how all of his, goals and aspirations are confined solely to this earth. And Aethan, it says, that was almost enough to start Aethan shouting. So I think Aethan doesn't believe that's all he's concerned with. But if not, what is it that he's after? We had the whole thing with Lindon siphoning power off of the Dread God in the last book. And the Titan wanting to come back to Sacred Valley because it was going to find something that would finally fill this hunger inside of it. And it's been mentioned more than once that the Dread Gods have tried to get into the labyrinth and they have never been successful. So there's something in there, and I don't think it's the same as Subject 1 that's drawing them. I have to assume that thing that's drawing them is what Rhaegon Shen is after himself, but I don't know what could draw both him and Dread Gods. I just don't have enough information. So, yeah, Jake is in the chat talking because I was saying how Lindon's evacuation did not go well. And Jake says he was supposed to have 25 more years to get ready. Exactly. True. And I really do feel for him. This all got accelerated. It's not his fault. Literally, the Abaddon were just up there yeah, you know what? I think I'm going to fuck with fate. God. I was really confused about all of the monarchs being so adversarial with the Abaddon in Wintersteel, and I just take it all back. The Abaddon can kick rocks. Suriel seems to be the one that has the kind of compassion I would expect a being of that level to have. Machiel, he has knowledge and awareness, but that's not the same thing as compassion. So, yeah, I don't know. Evil is saying they want to get to Subject 1 to join or consume it. Okay. I just don't know what that means. They're going to eat Subject 1? The dread gods that descended from it are going to go back and eat it? Weird. I don't know what to make of that. What does that even do? And don't tell me. That's a spoiler. Probably shouldn't have told me that either, honestly. But what can you do? But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. Is Regan Shen wanting to rule the world? He doesn't seem to want to become an Abaddon. Is there any sort of restriction? They seemed to be willing to take him if he were to try and ascend. But he's such a bad person. And is there at any point with the Abaddon someone who has really just done too much shit that they'd be like, I don't think we're going to recruit you, actually. You can go ahead and stay there. Because I feel like having brought back the Bleeding Phoenix, feels like he crossed the line with that one. That I would hope they would not be willing to take him on. Let's see. Evil says they are all incomplete. They each hunger for one of different powers. Sammy says, the Phoenix ate the finger Shen gave it. Okay, I didn't know the finger was Subject 1's, is the thing. I did not have that information. I don't know if I was supposed to know that, but I didn't. So, there's that. Okay, so chapter 14. It starts off with Lindon intimidating yet another elder because everybody is fucking around and trying to find out. And he is getting bored of having to constantly explain to people what the fuck he is and who he is and not to do this. And it's just boring. I love when he says, my eye sees all, and Dross comes out and makes this big intimidating show. Honestly, Dross getting a little bit megalomaniacal, as much as I am genuinely a little concerned at times, it's still so fun. I can't get mad at it. They are rushing. Everybody is finally, after the events of the last chapters, truly beginning to panic and actually listen. And the dread god has stopped for a minute and has paused outside of the mountains to feed. But that can, he just basically stopped to take a sip of water and eat a granola bar. That's not going to last long. And it says the Heaven's Glory artists and their grand patriarch were bound in scripted chains, struggling from the back of a wagon that Lindon kept a special eye on. He might need to use them as hostages when he reached their school. Remind me, does anything happen with these guys? I don't think so, right? Do they just get left in the the trail of the dread god and we assume that they're dead? I'm fine with that. Just, FYI. But yeah, I really I just keep being I don't know, Lyndon, it might have just been kinder if you killed them yourself than leaving them like this. But he's doing his best. He really is. And this is when he comes across the Heaven's Glory test that they have apparently deactivated to make it easier for people to come up. And he's giving them some accolades for a second, oh, well, good for them. Ethan must have taken over. And then he begins to realize that shit is not well. And Dross has to point out, hey, maybe I should have seen this sooner, but because this place is literally fucked, your senses are not what they normally are, so I kind of have to blame you. But this is a battle that, he's in bad shape. You may want to check on Ethan. And Ethan feels very exhausted. Most of his Madra is worn out. And Lindon gets extremely defensive right away. When he begins to approach Ethan, he gets attacked. And at first I was like, what the fuck? And then I realized, oh, these are Kazan people who are guarding Ethan because he just saved their lives and they are very grateful. So Lindon just tells them, pardon, after they try to kill him. I'm only here to help. And when Lindon sees Ethan, he is like caked in blood, like just covered in it. And he gets really alarmed for a second. But then when he actually scans him, he realizes, oh, he's not even wounded. He's just exhausted. This isn't even his blood at all. And again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I would love to see these fights on the big screen. Seeing Ethan rip apart Heaven's Glory members, I just cannot. It would be so satisfying. Because the fact that there's blood, it's not that there is never blood in battles. It just feels like whenever we read about the battles, it feels, especially with Lindon, whenever he's using dragon's breath, they just burn away, they disappear. And I feel like watching Ethan with his ability, drawing blood, it would be a particular kind of spectacle, I guess, is really the word I want. Combined with his inherent charisma, that would really be a show. I would enjoy watching that, you know? Yaren would, of course, draw a ton of blood because of how blade-focused her abilities are. But she feels a lot more practical. Not that it wouldn't be an amazing fight to watch, because obviously she's just this fighter that's beyond belief. But she doesn't do it to have fun with it the way that Ethan does at times. So, yeah, and Lindon, when he sees this, says to Ethan, I can't believe anybody was able to push you this far. And Ethan is like, they took hostages, and I am just as susceptible to that as anybody. So, at this point, fucking more Heaven's Glory come out and try to attack. Ugh! Bored! You guys are so predictable. Get a life! Ha! Too late now. And so Lindon says that he claims Heaven's Glory School in the absence of its jades. And this guy, after being bested, has the absolute nerve to eyeball Lindon's badge. Dude, what are you doing? You know, it's like, you know, he just crushed you. Whatever his badge says is none of your goddamn business. Just, it's like, it's like somebody gives you a jar of salsa labeled mild, and you take a bite and that shit sets your mouth on fire. But you just keep eating it because it says mild and you're convinced that it can't possibly be that hot. Just because that's what it says. You have the evidence of your body right there. Pay attention to that. Stop it. The label doesn't matter right now, dude. Anyway. So, at this point, he tells them, thank you for protecting my master. And they're like, oh shit. And all of a sudden, Dross says, oh no. And I love this. First of all, Ethan says, wait, what? What? Oh no, what? What's happening? I can't see anything. I hate this place. And I was like, yes, same. I am as uncomfortable with Ethan not having his abilities as Ethan is. I depended on Ethan. And the fact that he can't see shit is just extremely unnerving. I hate it. So, this is when the Titan lets out a roar. And he begins coming toward them. And everybody begins to just fucking take off. At first, Ethan's cloud ship doesn't even look like it's going to make it. It finally begins to sort of limp along. And it says, to his relief, he could see a ship on a purple cloud flying off with its deck packed with people. Not all the Akura cloud ships had taken off after all. Another, resting on the ground, was steadily filling with people. But as he looked back west over Sacred Valley, despair choked him again. There were still uncountable many people left. Uncountably. He couldn't begin to see the end of the human line stretching off into the distant clan buildings and beyond. Not everyone would make it, but his family still could. So he goes back to Windfall, and all of his family are standing on the like little deck area because they can't open the door, and he is even too weak to open it immediately because his Madra is like worn out. So he gets up against it, puts his hand on the door, opens it up, lets them inside. "Where were you?" Lindon's father demanded. "If this motherfucker doesn't sit the fuck down and shut the fuck up, I am going to personally decapitate him. I cannot stand this anymore. All he wants to do is whine. Why didn't you come back? Where were you at this point? Why couldn't you have gotten here sooner and given us some more notice?" Nobody wants to listen to him, including you. So how about you just be grateful that he saved your worthless, pathetic, shitty, abusive ass at all and go be shitty somewhere else. I have no time for this dickhead. Ugh! I'm over it. Just feel a way about it. I wasn't ready. "Where were you?" Dude, what do you want? He's one person. And we know how powerful he is, and still what kind of limitations he's under. But you don't even think he's half as powerful as he is. So, literally, tell me what you're expecting. What do you want him to be doing? What do you think he can accomplish? I want an answer. I want you to tell me, what the fuck is your standard exactly? Because this is like a 5th grader, yelling at somebody who is 65. Like, just, no, you don't get to. Sit down, you don't know anything. Anyway, so, at this point, it's very clear that they are going to need to take off. And people spot Lindon's cloud ship and are like, "Oh shit," and this fucking book it over there. Like, they don't know him. They weren't invited, but guess what? They're coming. And his sister is very sort of like cagey about it. And she's like, how are we going to carry everybody? How many can we fit? How much room do we have? And Lindon says, "Enough for these at least." And she lets out a sigh of relief. And he thinks, had she expected him to turn away people for no reason? And I'm like, you know what, Lindon? She may be of the same mind as like the other members of your clan earlier, where she really thinks maybe you're holding enough of a grudge that you just leave them to die because you're that pissed. And, it just goes to show how little she really understands him. But I think that might be where her head was at that moment. I don't know. I don't know if she's maybe just thinking he's that concerned with their, like, just his family's welfare alone. But yeah, that is just not his energy at all. So he lets as many people get on board as he possibly can allow. It turns out to not even be about the number of people that can fit. It's truly down to just how much time they can spend. They are not at capacity by the time they fly away, but they can't stay any longer. And it breaks Lindon's heart because when he is flying off, he hears people on the ground left behind screaming, and there's just nothing to be done. And this is the kind of thing that I think weighs a lot of people down. When you have a lot of compassion, you want to save everyone, and it's just not possible. You can do what you can do, but that doesn't feel like enough when you're faced with this tide of tragedy a lot of the time. And I know that for myself, I went through a period where I kind of gave up for a little while because I was just like, I can't do enough, so I won't do anything. And it really is hard to get yourself out of that headspace, you know? It just feels so futile sometimes. The sheer amount of unhappiness and injustice, it's overwhelming. And I just really felt for him and how frustrated he was. And he tried so hard. He did everything he could, you know, which is what Yaren winds up saying about him to his family later, because his mother says something. They call Yaren his teacher, which is just, they don't get it. I swear to God, I can't wait for them to finally get it. It's going to happen pretty soon, because by the end of these chapters, they are back in Akura territory, where Lindon is basically famous, and they are going to have to see how he's treated and what he's capable of. But at the moment, first, they call Yaren his teacher. And second, when she mentions the tournament, his father asks, "Oh, did you watch it?" to Lindon. And it's just, he could be shown footage. But Dross says that their footage is from Lindon's memories is too heavy, and that it really needs to be done with the I think he says the Nine Cloud Soul. That footage is safe for people of any level, which, you know, I guess that's a good reason. I was sort of wondering why Lindon hadn't showed them more, and I assumed that it was mostly due to his own, I don't want to say modesty, because that's not actually true, but just more his own unwillingness to keep trying to prove himself. It feels like because his family didn't get it right away, he's kind of feeling like, you know what, screw them. And I do understand that energy. And so I sort of attributed it to that, but it being almost impossible for them to handle the memories themselves, I actually prefer that as an explanation, so that's fine. But I am really unsure what to expect even when they do figure out who Lindon actually is and what he's capable of. Because when people have underestimated you like this, and they have done so consistently, and have been faced with evidence that they're wrong, and yet are so entrenched in this belief that they can't even see that evidence for what it is, I don't know what proof and what reaction would be satisfying. You know, I wanted that back there in the Sacred Valley and didn't get it. And now I feel like because Lindon will have been so weighed down by how many people didn't wind up making it out, any satisfaction we could have gotten from his family recognizing his abilities finally is going to be eclipsed by his grief over that. And it's just kind of, you know, and there's something very true about that. Life doesn't give you a lot of moments of real validation and satisfaction. You have to make those for yourself, because we all want the 80s movie moment where at the end the nerd is proved to be a hero and everybody realizes how wrong they were, and the bad guy is off to the side in his Cadillac convertible filled with horse shit. You know, just giving you a Back to the Future reference there. We all want those moments, but they don't come almost ever. I think in all of our lives, you get one. You maybe get two. And if you've had one already in your life, you might be done. You may never get another one. So, in a sense, if Will White never really gives us that satisfaction, I'm not going to be mad, because that's good writing. Life is like that. But I want it anyway, you know? Give me something that isn't real life. Let me have it in fiction just for a second. I just need it. Please. I'll snort it. I'll inject it right into my veins. So, at this point, the light begins to flicker. And And Dross is beginning to get worried that the Titan is getting stronger. And as they are sensing this, Dross is like, okay, we really have to go. And they take off. And this is when he hears them screaming and is just really concerned about Ethan, but it turns out that he is able to take off as well. He's looking at how many people are still on the ground, and Orthos has to be like, you've saved these lives. Focus on that. This is when his dad says, with only another week, we could have gotten everyone. And again, it's just, Lindon is right. The fucking Dread God was outside the like on the other side of the mountain range, and they still didn't want to fucking listen to him. I do not think more time would have helped. I just don't. Maybe if they had gone in there a lot more aggressively out of the gate and proven their abilities to everybody out of the gate. But if you go in that aggressive, people are going to mistrust you even more. They're going to assume it's an outright attack. So it's really hard to know. Anyway, so at this point, he looks up and he sees a speck hurtling past them. And here comes Malice in her awesome armor, which is just so cool. I love Malice so much. Ugh, I do. She's such a cunt, and I don't care. I just love her so much. Honestly, there are just some people who are dickheads, and you're like, yes, exactly. Like, I want to be that kind of asshole, you know? And I really, with her, she's that one for me. So yeah, she begins to fight the Titan. And then here comes Yaren knocking at the door, swanning in, going, well, just buffing her nails. I got a monarch. What have you done today? And I was like, Yaren, oh, you're the best. I love you so much. So this battle begins to heat up. And families rushed off of Lindon's fortress. They hadn't wanted to leave so relatively close to Sacred Valley, but there wasn't much choice. He was going to fly back. Ideally, they would take the people of Sacred Valley much further away, but this much of a head start was better than nothing. They needed to go back and give the others the same chance. And I was like, yes, I would do this as well if I were in this situation, but it is hard to read. You just want them to fucking get out, you know? So they head back, and they watch the battle. And I'm not going to go into too much detail here because of time, but this sounds so rad. And Lindon is getting more and more hype as he's watching because Malice really feels like she's holding her own. And meanwhile, his mother is asking, like, did she increase in size because she's advanced? Like, what is this? And Yaren has to explain about the armor and about her role in the Uncrowned tournament and all of this stuff. Finally, it comes to Lindon having gotten 16th. Geron asked, out of how many? It doesn't matter, Lindon said. And I'm like, yes, it does! Lindon! Oh my god. I wanted to grab him. Like, I totally get it. And honestly, I think he's right for trying to avoid any more attempts at getting validation. I totally get the headspace he's in. But God, I just wanted him to let somebody say, you know? I really did. And it's so, for me, I keep thinking about how Lindon was so upset to not get into the top 16. He came in 16. He came in top 16. He didn't get into the Uncrowned. That's the one. And the reason that he didn't was because of fighting Yaren, who won the whole thing. And we watch him look at people who did get into the Uncrowned group, and the simulations, he wins every time. So I want Lindon to, like, absorb that, but it clearly hasn't quite sunk in the way that I would like it to. You only didn't make it into the top because you fought the person who was so good they beat everyone else. And that is not a thing to be ashamed of, sir. Like, shit, you know? So, the woman fighting up there is queen over most of the continent. She came here as a personal favor to Yaren. And this is when they say, We are honored to have you go so far for your student. And it's like this real awkward moment where they begin to realize, oh, that's not what this is. At least his sister and mother do. And they ask, or Kelsa asks very delicately, what is it that drew you to him? What is it that she says? I'm trying to find oh yeah, here it is. I'd be very grateful if you could fill us in on what we missed. We haven't gotten to know the new Lindon. It was his mother's way of asking, what do you see in him, without being rude, and Lindon was honestly relieved. Yaren wouldn't answer that question. And Dross is like, yeah, she will. You know the old Yaren, but like, keep in mind Ruby's energy, that's in there now. So, and then Yaren says, might be you know this already, but he doesn't give up. If you cut off 2 legs and an arm, he'd fight you with 1 hand and his teeth. If there's a way to win, he'll hunt it down or he'll die on the trail. Haven't spent long in your valley, but everybody I met tripped all over each other to see who could stab me in the back first. Guess you taught him right, because he'd twist himself inside out before he turned on me. If my core popped tomorrow and I was no better than a copper, he wouldn't leave me alone until he found a way to put me back together. He could have set himself up like a king in some corner of the world. Could have scooped you 3 up, set fire to heaven's glory, and left. But he stuck around for people who treated him like their least favorite whipping boy. Don't know who he was before, but that's who he is now. Oh my god, I love it so much. It's so good. Lindon, look, I know you didn't get what you wanted from your family, and that sucks, and you get to be grievous over that. But this is a gem. Store it in your little memory palace and take it out when you're feeling bad about yourself. And remember that one of the most badass women on the face of this planet thinks this about you, and just keep that warm at night, you know? I just really, you guys, there is nothing like somebody that is very close to you thinking the world of you, because so many of us convince ourselves that the only reason anyone out there likes us is because they don't know us that well. You know, I think a lot of us are laboring under that sort of delusion. It's just like, oh yeah, well, they think I'm cool because I have tricked them, but I actually am a piece of shit. And if anybody got to know me well enough, they would realize. So when somebody has gotten to know you well and they still think you're fucking excellent, you can't argue. You keep trying to say that you tricked them. Then that's just you insulting them, you know? I love this. He wasn't as great as she described, but he wanted to be. I was like, you literally are. There's not a thing she said that isn't true. I mean, is there? If she asked you, hey, my core popped, are you going to leave me? You wouldn't. You got the opportunity to set fire to heaven's glory, save your own family, and bailed. You didn't. Literally everything that she said about you is factually correct. There's very little in there that's just like puffing him up. It's all based on evidence. So yeah, Lindon, shut up. Take the compliment. I was very happy about this. So when they left the Cloud Fortress, there were even more people flooding out of Sacred Valley. With the Akura cloud ships gone, the number of people seeking refuge seemed endless. The only problem Lindon had to deal with in the aftermath of a Dread God attack was locating everyone who ran and bringing them home to rebuild. He would thank the heavens. So, Mercy comes in, and she does this thing where she sinks something in the ground with the heel of her foot. Now, guys, I don't know if I'm supposed to know what this is. I was assuming that it was, like, linked to the portal that Malice winds up sending them through, but I don't know if she would need Mercy to plant something or not. So I'm just not sure if I missed what it's supposed to be or if it's said later, you know, but, you know, Lindon tries to be respectful of the fact that she's clearly trying to hide this, and Dross is not interested in being respectful. He keeps trying to sort of out her about it, and she doesn't mention it. She just keeps on sort of covering it up with dirt. So at this point, the fight between the Titan and Malice is continuing to go off, and all of a sudden, let's see, where is it? Granted, the valley wasn't in pristine shape anymore, but it was still mostly intact. He could see Elder Whisper's tall tower from here. Lindon, his bones were starting to hurt under her grip. And all of a sudden, he begins to realize there's a second Dread God. And we cut to North Strider, who is dealing with the wake of the Titan. And by dealing with, I mean crushing skulls in the most literal way. I imagine North Strider at this moment looking like the cover of a heavy metal album. Just coated in blood, reclining on the crushed head of a dragon, fucking drinking it in. Just completely metal. And all of a sudden, he gets the sense, and this thing is so, it takes him by surprise, and I just hate seeing monarchs taken by surprise. Warning, threat approaching. It redirected his attention north to the Phoenix. It was moving fast. It was heading for the Titan. He needed to be close, but not too close. When he emerged again, he was hovering in the clouds over a mountain whose peak had been broken off long ago. He looked to the east where he heard a searing cry. And he can tell that Malice is on the other side of the valley. He's trying to judge what to do with the Phoenix. And here, on the east side, the Phoenix was turning toward the valley. Refugees fled beneath it, but they were so weak as to be invisible to the Dread God. That didn't make them safe. On the contrary, they would be torn apart by blood spawn, not to mention the collateral damage from the Phoenix itself. But no one down there could attract the attention of a hungry Dread God. Until his Oracle Codex drew his attention to his own spiritual perception, and he realized who he was feeling down there. Then his irritation flared into true anger. The most valuable young sacred artists on the continent were all down there, clustered together. With Dross, a powerful tool deserving of further study. They had deliberately placed themselves in the path of a Dread God, and Malice had allowed this idiocy. And this is one of those moments where I'm like, look, North Strider, I totally get your position on this, but also you have to admit that part of you is a little bit proud of them, right? Because North Strider is actually pretty altruistic. Regarding human beings, obviously. Dragons can go fuck. But people, North Strider has a lot of concern for people's welfare, especially considering what we see monarchs prioritizing. He has more than the average monarch, it seems to me. So if anybody is going to understand desperately wanting to do all you can to save as many people as possible against all odds, he won't like it. He'll be mad about it, but I just really think that North Strider there's a part of him that's going to understand and know that that's an extremely rare personality trait, you know? So if you're going to have people who feel that kind of compassion for other human beings, you want them to be the most valuable sacred artists on the continent. Those are the people that you want to have some serious power. So I just, on the one hand, I totally get it, and I believe his anger, and especially his anger at Malice. But on the other hand, I can't help but think that, looking back, he'll be like, those kids, good for them. Looking back, eventually. So then we go to Zeal. And I was proven right, because my concern was what the trauma had done to him. And I just didn't see him abandoning people again. He wouldn't be able to do it. However, we get a really nice sort of, what's the word? Scene feels inadequate. It's more like a blip where we get to see a bit of PTSD from him. Like, genuine, sheer panic, seeing a whole other scene in front of your face for a moment kind of situation. And he has a moment similar to the one that he has in the tournament, where he is just asking himself, what was I thinking? How could I have let myself get into this situation? I am the same piece of shit I've always been. Of course I couldn't do this. And it's just so sad because, you know, we love him and he's trying. He's doing all he can. And I just really, this moment was so painful to watch because we know these people actually listen. Like the Kazan clan are the ones that I have probably the warmest feelings towards because they listened right away. So I consider them to be less shitty than the rest of Sacred Valley. And I know how much he will beat himself up and, you know, bleed with guilt if he does just bail. Zeal flew resolutely away. His hammer weighed down the 1,000-mile clouds, so he sucked the weapon back into his soul space, but without anything to hold on to, his fingers kept shaking. He had to clasp them together. He paid no attention to the screams from beneath him because they were drowned out by other screams, older screams. And I was like, yeah, all right, here it is, because this shit has to be dealt with. And this is what they call immersive therapy, I think, or maybe exposure therapy, where people who deal with PTSD are subjected sometimes to the very thing that triggered it in the first place. And it's supposed to help them break through to the other side. That's part of like a theory, you know. Doesn't always work, I'm sure. But that's sort of what's going on here. And also, I don't know if we had seen, like, heard this before, but one of the Stormcallers apparently had bound him in place and propped him up so he could see his own people getting devoured. And that is fucked up. That kind of sadism is, that's a whole thing outside of, like, trying to ascend, you know, or trying to advance. That's just cruelty. And I don't remember if we know what the Sage of Calling Storms is doing right now, if he is or she is alive or dead. But I am hoping that they come to a sticky end if they are not already dead. So what kind of takes Zeal out of this is he uses his hammer to go up against one of these blood spawn while in the midst of his sort of like flashback episode. And it splatters blood in a very satisfying way. And that all of a sudden he's like, blood, and it takes him right out of it because the beings in his memory are of lightning. And he realizes that this is like a whole other, and he comes back to himself. And the fear is gone, and there is this like focus back. He poured himself into forging a green rune bigger than his chest, complex and intricate. He threw it hundreds of yards away, but it would only hover as long as he didn't quite complete the forging, so he had to hold the technique as he forged more and more. As he did, the Kazan clan gathered around him. They fought the spawn of the Bleeding Phoenix, covering Zeal, realizing whatever he was doing, it would win the day. And eventually, the clan leader is like, well, thank you. I wish you had warned us because we thought you were just fucking leaving. And Zeal says, what would be the point of that? Not like I have anywhere to go. But in truth, that is not the situation. He's saying that, but he had options and he didn't take them. Good for you. And this means, because of the arrival of the Bleeding Phoenix, that so many people got scared off of that edge of the mountain that they fled in other directions, and now there is a much shorter line to get through. Sammy says, Sage of Calling Storms, from what we have heard, sounds like a whole new level of a sadistic piece of shit. Oh, God. I am not looking forward to meeting them. Anytime that somebody gets off on cruelty, it's a kind of like irrationality that I don't know what to do with. You know, it's just such a twisted thing. I can't understand it. And I never have been, you know, like, even just making fun of people. Like, when I was a little kid, when I would see somebody getting made fun of, I would feel like my stomach hurt. Like, I would feel sick, literally, like, nauseous, watching people get bullied or made fun of. It just, I couldn't understand why anybody would like making somebody cry, just in those little instances. And once you get to the point where you're like physically hurting people, that I just don't get it. I don't fucking get it. Something's wrong with you. Like, you know, there's something wrong with you. So at this point, we go back to Lindon, and he's asking for a combat report against Yaren because he's worried that the Bleeding Phoenix turning up may have, like, taken control of her somehow. He is incorrect. Yaren's a little bit like, what the fuck? She understands, though. She's not being a dick, but she is a little bit like, dude. And, of course, the first thought everybody has is, like, what about the people that are still on the ground? And all hell is breaking loose outside, by the way. I think Lindon's windows all get blown out at one point because of the sheer force of everything. I think that was the force of Northstrider landing and punching the Titan in the head, I think is what he does. Which is just, what an entrance. Can't get mad at that. And meanwhile, throughout all of this, Lindon is just feeling so overwhelmed, and people are collapsing around him, even on the cloud ship, due to the Bleeding Phoenix, and, like, this guy is bleeding out of his eyes. And he's asking Dross, what can we do? And Dross doesn't even have any fucking response. He just says, Lindon, and then trails off. And he turns around and sees Yaren curled up on the floor, and she says, it wants me back. And Lindon realizes that the Bleeding Phoenix is looking for Yaren because Yaren's got a piece of its blood shadow. It's wanting her as a part of its own power back. And this, Owen, oh my God, did you hear me, guys? I put my fiance's name in Lindon's place in this scene, which I feel like is a huge compliment. So you're welcome, Owen. Lindon focuses on the Phoenix's willpower and tries to do that willpower thing again that he has done with the Titan when he was sucking its power, that he did with Northstrider. It does nothing. It brushes him so completely aside. And that's really what, like, the theme is for me in this section, is Lindon really, truly, finally beginning to grasp how completely eclipsed he is by the power of this thing. And also, interestingly, how not quite eclipsed the monarchs are. They are definitely sort of, they are outmatched, but they're closer than he would have expected, and there is something to them that seems to be hindering them in some way. So, Sammy, I think you said up thread, we were told in the scene with Rhaegon Shen that hand belonged to Subject 1. I don't know how I missed that. I read that section twice. Actually, I think I might have read it 3 times, and I don't know how I missed that, so my apologies. If that is so, then that hand, it can fit in a box. This isn't like one of these beings. These dread gods are manifestations of a kind of that are not to be put on the same level as a human being. And yet the hand in that box that fucking Rhaegon Shen's toting around with him is like human hand sized. So I have to assume Subject 1 was a person. So what the fuck? What is... What? How? I don't know. But I feel like that has to be why these things feel so sort of like close in a way to the power level of a monarch to Lindon. That's my like assumption here. I don't know. So Northstrider conjured dragons. He struck with blows that split the clouds. He summoned planes of black force that shielded him, blah, blah, blah. We hear all of these cool things, which do actually sound really, really rad. Northstrider was out of his depth. Even so, he wasn't overwhelmed. It wasn't tilted as terribly as Lindon had imagined. They could fight on an almost even level, but if the monarchs pushed too hard, the dread gods would awaken and work together, and the monarchs had people to protect while the dread gods didn't. But there was something to that explanation that didn't quite satisfy Lindon. The monarchs were that close in power to the Phoenix. Even if they joined forces, they were still outnumbered by monarchs. There had to be something else. So I am assuming that other thing that is like the factor of subject 1, which I'm pretty sure Lindon doesn't know anything about. I don't believe he does. So then we have Malice joining in on this whole fight, and all of a sudden they are all thinking, maybe we can turn around. Maybe we can get a few more people. And the Titan, meanwhile, just completely begins to wallow through Sacred Valley, right through the center of the Way clan, I believe. The Central Avenue, the artery that supplied traffic for all the major businesses, vanished beneath its colossal foot. I love that description. It's not like, oh, it became nothing but rubble. It's the specific imagery of like that whole main thoroughfare is the size of its foot. Just for perspective, you know, like shit. And his tail slashes through Elder Whisperer's tower. But this is when, okay, so Lindon doesn't know what happened to Elder Whisperer because he thinks if he hadn't escaped then he was dead now. And it turns out that Lindon's watching this all out basically on like a big screen TV in front of all of this. This is all being projected to him. And Mercy has to come over and be like, dude, can you turn this off? Everybody is really bugging out. And his sister asks, is there something we can do? Maybe we could go back. We can save one more person. And he is going to do that. At the very least, they'd be able to pick up a few more people. But then he looks up and sees this wall of purple crystal, and he gets transmitted somewhere else. There's like a time vortex, space vortex, whatever you want to call it. And nobody else, I really wonder what everyone else is like going to be feeling, because Lindon's been sent through space before and they haven't. So this has got to be really fucking jarring and disorienting. I wouldn't be surprised if they just like are vomiting, you know? And he's, as they're in this darkness, and he is realizing, oh, okay, so I guess Sacred Valley's like not an option anymore. All he could feel was the space twisting around him and the sinking numbness of failure. It wasn't a failure, Dross said. It wasn't. Lindon. And Dross, thank you, buddy. You know, thank you. I know that it's not going to be easy fighting that constant internal monologue that he's going to have for probably the rest of his life. But I appreciate you fighting, because it wasn't. I know it feels like it. God knows. I am as much of a perfectionist as anybody. It's really genuinely inhibits my quality of life. That's the kind of perfectionist I am. Every day I try to not be like that. So saving 5% of what you hoped is not what, I mean, I just don't blame him, you know, but also it's a lie that it's a failure. And I feel so bad for Lindon. Oh God, I want him to feel not worthless. I want his Underlord revelation to not be what drives him anymore. I don't want that to be it. And yet, that might be what makes him such a good person. I don't know, you know? So here, the darkness falls away. They floated over a dark city. Spires of smooth black stone reached to the violet-tinted sky, and the shadow aura was thick here. Luminous flowers shone white, pink, or blue from carefully cultivated public gardens, and remnant horses pulled carriages through the sky on tracks of purple flame. That sounds fucking dope. All around the city, walls stretched up, black and imposing. Some of the remaining irons cried out, groping blindly as their senses weren't strong enough to penetrate the haze. I feel so bad for these people. They have had a shock. Ugh, so many. Lindon had to steer the fortress away from a smaller cloud ship before it crashed directly into them. Far below, a scripted spire stood proudly from an open courtyard, a teleportation anchor. Even for a monarch, it would have been hard to send their entire cloud ship through the space in one trip. Malice had sent them to the one place she could reach easily. Moongrave, capital of the Akura clan. The fight for Sacred Valley was over. And that's where I had to stop, which is just really not fair at all. So, I have 2 episodes worth of coverage left, which does wind up being exactly right. Thank goodness. I was sort of worried that I had, fucked it up. I should have probably, separated everything out ahead of time, but I did not do that. And I'm going to just do 2 chapters for the next one. That will leave only 30 pages for the final episode, but I'm going to have so much to talk about because it'll be the last episode. That shouldn't be an issue at all. But yeah, guys, this has been such an emotional book. I loved it. So far, I'm really into that emotion because it's such a payoff after everything, even though it's kind of not a payoff because everybody fucking sucks. But that aside, it is actually a payoff story-wise, if not in the, sense that I had hoped for. So far, I am really into it. But it feels different. I have suggested this series to practically everybody who will listen. And there have been a lot of people that are patrons of Unspoiled who are in the Unspoiled Facebook group and have torn through this series. Then there are a couple people who started it and they are frustrated because they feel as if it feels too video gamey. That it's just people focusing on leveling up in a predictable line that feels a little bit too rote. And I completely get that. I'm certain that there is a kind of fatigue that comes with that type of story that is more pronounced if you are somebody who plays video games or maybe watches a lot of anime. I don't do either of those things. So for me, I don't have that kind of fatigue. But I do understand what people are saying. I just feel that Will makes these characters so engrossing. And the stakes feel so personal that even though there is a bit of a video gamey aspect with advancement, that doesn't feel like what the story is about at all to me, And I just was sort of curious. There was somebody who left a comment, and I don't know where. Maybe it was on YouTube. I get those sometimes. Where they said that they thought it interesting that when they talk about this book with people of different genders, women tend to be much more focused on the emotional aspect of the story, and men seem to be much more interested in the workings of the magical system. And I really wonder if there are people out there who started off focused on the magical system and then kind of came around and that's not their focus at all anymore. Because the magical system is compelling, especially because as we get further on, it becomes clear how little people actually know about it. You know, like Yeren does something that has never been accomplished because there are tons of frontiers yet to conquer in terms of just learning about how Madra works in this universe. And yet, I feel like the characters just become so strong that it overshadows that. And that's not a bad thing. I don't know. It's sort of, I feel that probably those people are also the ones who were frustrated with the fact that Yeren beat Lindon when they finally fought in the Uncrowned tournament. Meanwhile, I felt like that was only fair. Yeren has been putting in a lot more time than Lindon, and I just felt like she had earned beating him. You know, she's just on another level, and he's catching up, but he's not there yet, and that's fine. He fucking held his own. That's still a lot. So, anyway, I am so happy with where we are right now, especially because, as we know, this is what Lindon has been building toward. But it happened ahead of schedule. It's evidently over now. The series is definitely not over because we have the Froshir out there fucking shit up. So now we're going to get into territory that is completely uncharted, that Lindon didn't plan on. What does he do when he doesn't have this particular goal in mind anymore? How does that affect him and his drive? You know, I'm just very curious to see that. So, okay, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you guys again so much for listening. I really appreciate all of you. Thank you again to Andy for commissioning this episode. Everybody who is listening, thank Andy, because he is the reason why the show exists. And I don't want to become one of those fans, but I do desperately want to know when the next book is coming out. I apologize. I am an ungrateful bitch. I will sit in the corner now. See you all on Tuesday. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.